drums, book the flights. It's time for us to go to the Gulf area, Tom, because Qatar have put in a bid for Manchester United. Oh, so is Jim Ratcliffe, but we're not here to talk about that too much. I joke, but of course we will rip into all of that. Welcome to the United Pubcast. I am Larry. I'll be your host for today, and I'm joined by Tom as always. But get your thoughts in. How do you feel about Qatar? We're just fresh off the World Cup, and it feels like we're in Qatari heat today because I'm about to melt in Sydney. But Tom, how are you, mate? Big news.
Talk about big news. I think every Manchester United fan has waited for this day since 2005. We've been waiting for it. Here it comes. It's finally here, and there is such excitement, but there are also so many questions that I think we thought when this day would come back 15, 16 years ago, it was going to just be, okay, perfect, sort of paradise. But that is for some people, and other people have legitimate concerns, whatever side of the fence you do sit on. So huge news, huge exciting news, but still huge questions, both sides of the coin. So big day for Manchester United, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. But is it time to oil up? We will let you know. But we're going to rip into it. We're going to ask you all the right questions. So stay tuned. Tom, I'm going to start with the statement from Qatar. I'm going to butcher this name, but look, it's Sheik, or look, I have a Middle Eastern background, so I've got to say it right. Sheik Jassim Hamad Al Thani. Obviously,
when I typed his name into Google, it auto-corrected to Jason, so I'm going to call him Sheik Jassim.
Sheik Jassim. Can you practice saying Sheikh for me?
Sheik, without the tongue action.
Sure, Shrek, whatever you like, the green guy. But I'll bring up the statement. And Sheik Jassim Bin Hamad Al Thani today confirmed his submission of a bid for 100% Manchester United Football Club ownership. That clearly English isn't a first language reading that first paragraph, Tom. But we will continue. The bid plans to return the club to its former glories, both on and off the pitch, and above all, will seek to place fans at the heart of Manchester United Football Club once more. PR tick right there. This is where it gets juicy, though. The bid will be completely debt-free via Sheik Jassim's 92 Foundation, which will look to invest in the football team, the training center, the stadium, and wider infrastructure, fan experience, and communities the club supports. The vision of the bid is for Manchester United Football Club to be renowned for footballing excellence and regarded as the greatest football club in the world. More details of the bid will be released when appropriate, if and when the bid process develops. Tom, lots to rip into in that statement. Firstly, let's start with the first statement, debt-free. I think music to every Manchester United fan's ears. Whoever wrote this statement has been on Twitter over the last 5 to 10 years. I can guarantee you of that. But before I ask you, Tom, I'm going to bring it to the comments, and then I'm going to ask you the hard-hitting questions. But Adam, who's on the show quite regularly deputizing, thank you, mates. Ratcliffe doesn't have the money to compete with Sheik Jassim. I don't know if it's about the money so much, but I hear what you're saying. In terms of their wealth, there's a valid argument to be had. Rob, they get my vote. I'm assuming you mean the Qataris, mate. Nobody will be perfect, but really they'll help the club get back in all aspects. We'll rip into the political aspects in a moment. I've got my questions lined up, and I'll be firing them at Tom. So make sure you stay tuned. And if you are enjoying the chat so far, make sure to hit a like on the video. And then Rob making the point, everyone is forgetting the Glazers could want a piece of the pie and just have investors. I don't foresee that, but we'll absolutely ask Tom those questions. And Charlie, nice to see you, mate. Desperately, I think Qatar bid will win, but wouldn't want them anywhere near the club. PSG are a shambles of a club. We'll rip into all of this, and I think there will be time to dissect this into greater detail. I think we'll for the purpose of this video, before we all get a bit too giddy, we'll keep it at a high level. But Tom, let's just dissect this statement a little bit. Obviously, it starts with debt-free. If you're a Manchester United fan, how do you feel reading that statement?
Yeah, look, reading the statement in terms of what we've had to the narrative around Manchester United since the Glazers have walked in, it is music to the ears. I think in regards to the simple payment, in regards to not having to sort of service the interest and just sort of pay off that debt throughout the Glazers' time, that money can be reinvested into the club, and more importantly for us, as fans into the transfer markets. So ultimately, that is a very good thing. Now, I'm sure PSG will come up into this discussion a lot. I think Charlie sort of alluded to it then. I was looking back through some of the sort of reports and articles around PSG over this time, with the Qatari have owned PSG. They still have had that debt there. So what does debt-free mean? I'm not sure. I'm not a financial person in regards to a lot of businesses say it's a good thing. Others don't. But PSG have run with a lot of debt over the years with the same owners, or with the same perceived owners. So it is very interesting. But in regards to my limited knowledge of it, it does sound like a very good thing in terms of how the Glazers have been unable to service the debt in a positive way for Man United. So it's a good thing. Time will tell how that plays out.
Absolutely. Look, on the debt thing, can I say I might be in the minority here where I'm not really too concerned by it. And the reason I say that is, I work in business. I understand how debt can be leveraged in terms of tax benefits. I think ultimately what you want is owners who, if push came to shove, can clear that debt. Whereas the Glazers, you never quite got that feeling. They didn't have the capital to buy the club. And if Manchester United were in a financially precarious position, they were not in a position to save Manchester United. So I think while the statement ultimately alludes to a promise of being debt-free, which is great, I don't really hold it with any great concern, because I mean, this guy is worth in the 300 billion range. I mean, I think he's got a couple billion spare change on Manchester United. On the bid itself, Tom, it's undisclosed, but this Qatari page on Twitter, who seems to be the source of truth all of a sudden, I don't even know who this person is. So with all due respect, I don't want to say that he is absolutely meant to be followed as is God's word, but he claims that this bid from Sheik Jassim Bin Hamad Al Thani is around the £5 billion mark. Can you see any potential bidder outbidding that fee? Because I think Qatar is going to blow Jim Ratcliffe out of the water. So if you're following Jim Ratcliffe, it's suggested that Ineos have also put in a bid. That's suggested to be around 4 billion with incentives. I don't know how incentives will work in terms of once the Glazers have already walked out the door. But when you're looking at it purely in financial terms, we'll get into the political component in a moment. But financially, can Jim Ratcliffe compete with Qatar?
I think it's what the Glazers want in terms of, if you look at an opening bid and an official bid in terms of the cash that's going to transfer in this transaction, you would say, no, he can't compete. But as you go in terms of the negotiations in regards to how the Glazers want to sort of go on with this sale, there is a chance where they will accept a lesser upfront offer and sort of take those incentives or potential future. So as Rob alludes to, maybe they have a piece of the pie in the future in regards to, there's obviously a great relationship the Glazers have with Middle Eastern sort of companies. So if Qatar come in, they might still keep the Glazers in line, sort of on that gravy train in regards to keeping them in the loop and sort of helping with future investments. I think the same with Jim Ratcliffe. He could come in with 4.5 billion or whatever it is, less than the Qataris, but offer them, maybe they've still got a 10% stake in some type of stake in the club. So look, ideally in terms of the outlook, we look at it and think, okay, the higher bid will sort of get the club, and that is ultimately probably what it will come down to. But in regards to how these businesses and how these families do business, there is a very real possibility where it won't all be about the money, it'll be about sort of future endeavours.
Yeah, it's a really valid point. I want to ask you about the political component of this, because there is a portion of the fan base, I've got to be honest, looking online, I think a lot of people are actually quite happy with the Qataris, and it looks like that the Qatari ownership now appears to be more popular than Sir Jim Ratcliffe, which probably wasn't thought was possible maybe a month or so ago, but shows that money absolutely does talk. Tom, I want to bring up the political component. While we don't like to talk about politics, we have to when it comes to Qatar. It's suggested that this Sheik, for our more white listeners like Tom, it is suggested that he's the chairman of the Qatari Islamic Bank. He is the son of a former prime minister of Qatar, so not quite part of the political party or the like we're saying with, say, Abu Dhabi, but there are ties there. There's no denying that. Let me ask you this then. On the political component, obviously, in terms of women's rights, in terms of I'm going to butcher the acronym, in terms of supporting homosexuality, transgender, and those people's rights, in terms of human rights in general. Is it fair to label that at someone who reportedly is a Manchester United fan, may be against all of those things? Is it really fair to judge this person and say it's sports washing because he's Qatari?
It's very interesting because here I was about a week ago, we were discussing this and we're saying, if this is Bob from the corner store in Qatar, well, let's not use Bob, let's use Jason, because that's what came up in the order correct. Let's say this is Jason Qatari. Just as he is, this individual, this private investor for Manchester United, has nothing to do with the royal family. You think, yes, oil me up. This is absolutely perfect. It's exactly what we want. The richest person who is a Manchester United fan and isn't state-owned or run by the government. This is absolutely perfect. Now, where we'll use that, if this guy buys Manchester United, where we'll use that when Liverpool fans are talking about oil money and everything, where we'll use that and say, no, he has nothing to do with the royal family. This is just one guy in Qatar who has a lot of money and a love for Manchester United. I will fall for that. I will use that. Ultimately, we can see through it. Yes, he is a private, this will be his name on the door will be a private thing in regards to he won't have those official ties to the Qatari government. Sorry. Well, we can see through this. Of course he is. And in terms of the funds this country has, nothing gets to say so without that government. I'm just thinking, yes, it's unfair for this individual. He might have different beliefs or he might have the same beliefs. I think that's out of our control as Manchester United fans. So Jim Ratcliffe might have horrible beliefs that we don't agree with, but they're not made public. So I think that is potentially unfair. What can we do as fans? I'm not sure. I think in regards to how the PR, in terms of we've seen this statement, how this will come out around this guy, I think is good in regards to for us fans in terms of dealing with it. I think it's very smart in terms of saying he's one investor, he's one man, he's nothing to do like the PSG situation. Ultimately, the cynic in me can see straight through that, and I think everyone will see straight through that. But ultimately, our hands are tied as fans. Are we going to change our opinion on Manchester United? No, we're not. And I'm just, it's a very tricky one. But ultimately, on the face of it, in regards to let's take this statement at face value, and that he's one man, just from Qatar with a lot of money, absolutely dream situation. Is it? Potentially not. I think those above him will still have a lot of the say.
Let me put a different spin on this. He is Qatari. Let's assume he has some sort of links to the royal family. In his statement, he's alluded to investing in both teams, so significantly the women. What if he's alluded to building an infrastructure and investing in Manchester as a city? So let me put this argument to you. By being the brand that Manchester United is, by having the fan base, the large and diverse fan base that Manchester United has, is there not an opportunity to change the way that Qatar operates and thinks? While it might
that is sports washing. That's 100% what it is. The Qatari guy, not the guy involved in this bid, but was at the face of the World Cup. He was doing a lot of the interviews, kind of let it slip. He alluded to the fact that Qatar in 20 years, in 50 years, will change their beliefs towards women's rights and they will change those laws. He alluded to that. That's in terms of these first steps into the Western world. And that is why they use clubs like PSG and Manchester. No, that is ideally what sports washing is, in terms of attracting the West to the Middle East and the Middle East taking their first steps towards the West. That is simply what it is. So Qatar will change their beliefs and the Middle East will change over time. Unfortunately, we're in a tricky spot now where it's almost at a real conflict. It's a real sort of a hurdle both sides need to get over, but they will get over it. And ultimately, yes, it is a good thing because both sides need to be educated. We need to be educated on very good things they're doing in the Middle East and some questionable things. And they also need to be, well, not so much them, but we need to be highlighted to issues that we're doing wrong in the West and positive. So it is one of those things that we can only treat it as fans in terms of glass half full, taking the positives. Need to, try and find the positives, and that positives will be education for both sides of the fence.
All right, let's talk about Jim Ratcliffe a little bit. Obviously, you and I clearly are very excited about the idea of Qatari investment, simply for the funds involved. I mean, the statement suggests money is no object. He is looking to get Manchester United back to the pinnacle of world football. In terms of he's committed investment into the stadium, which is well overdue. He's committed investment into the squads, well, both squads, the men's and the women's. And he's committed to investing into the football ground. If this deal happens, What does it mean for Manchester United as a football club? Excite
Yeah,
me. Tell
ultimately,
me
there,
the
yeah,
dream.
you do look at that statement, and 100% that it is absolute perfection. It is exactly what you want. And I put on Twitter not long ago in regards to, now I'm sure Jim Ratcliffe does have a statement there, or one of the American people does have a statement, but I've only seen the one from Qatar, and ultimately that's what I want. Whether I believe it, well, I probably do believe it. Now, maybe the motives are maybe a little bit different, and sort of how much belief I have in his knowledge of Manchester United's history, that's a debate for another day. But ultimately, in regards to what he's saying, is what I want to hear as a Manchester United fan. Now, if that's going to come about from his heart or from his motives, I'm not sure. Ultimately, I'm going to benefit either way as a Manchester United fan, so I'm not going to complain. So ultimately, you do go through that statement there, and it's exactly what you want. And obviously, we have to take knowledge and take sort of evidence on how they have run PSG. I say how they have. Okay, this is one individual. I'm going to go along the lines of I think it is Qatar. Now, whether that be a positive or negative, they had run PSG in a very unique way. I'm not a fan of how they've run PSG. I don't want to see Manchester United run like that. Are we going to see Man United run like that? Unfortunately, that is a very real possibility. Now,
They're different
PSG have.
owners, and I think that that's important to remember.
Are they different? I'm not saying they're not. Are they
Can I tell
different
you why
owners?
it is? Let me tell you why it is different. Because
It's a different club.
exactly the stature of Manchester United means players will be attracted to the club no matter what. The
Yeah.
legacy of the football club is already there, whether Qataris take over, Jim Ratcliffe, or you and I take over. Manchester United is part of the crown jewels of world football. That doesn't change. When you're Paris Saint-Germain, you're the fifth best league in Europe. You're not versing the best of the best players week in, week out. It's a harder sell. Mbappe wasn't promised the world to go to Real Madrid, but he was promised the world at PSG because they needed to promise him the world to convince him to stay. I think this is where this situation's different. Mbappe won't be bended. No club will bend to a player. We just haven't seen it. Cristiano Ronaldo, the worst we've probably seen with a big club is Barcelona and Lionel Messi. They gave him too much power toward the end in his final years there. But ultimately, we have not seen that players will have the sort of influence that Mbappe has. And unless it is PSG, I can't see a player having that influence again.
Look, you're right, and you're completely right in regards to we do have to draw comparisons to PSG, but yes, there are huge differences, and definitely that will play a part in regards to, especially in terms of the financial fair play rules, in terms of Manchester, the owners for Qatar coming into Man United won't need to cook the books. Man United's books work fine the way they are. We don't need any sort of any icing on the top of our sponsorships. Our sponsorships will do fine enough. So that there is that. There are definite differences. My concern there in regards to the PSG debate, or not concern, but the thing I see in regards to PSG, would you class Qatar's time there as a success? They could look to league titles and say 100%. I could say, well, those league titles, 90% of those are probably going to come anyway. Their goal at PSG was to go and win the Champions League. They look as far off as they've ever been, even that with that front three. So I'm just thinking, now, yes, they would, as you allude to, rightly so, they would run Manchester United differently. Fingers crossed that would be the case. But the only evidence we have is how they've run PSG. And ultimately, some people could say they have been 100% successful. I would argue that to a degree. And I just think, but then on the other hand, has Jim Ratcliffe run Nice well? The evidence would suggest not. So it's a tricky one there. That is my main concern, Larry. It's just in regards to PSG. It's not about Qatar. It's not about oil money. It's not about politics. It's not about human rights. It's not about American investment. It's not about Ratcliffe. My sole focus is what's happened at PSG. I don't want to see Manchester United become that. And it's just a fear in the back of my head that it could potentially be a scenario.
Judy Sports here. The initial bid is strong and it's only the opening bid. Michael Keegan said there will be 2 or 3rd rounds, which means Qatar will likely bid even higher. I think that'll ultimately come down, Judy, to whether other parties show interest. If it's only these 2 parties, well, there's no point for a 2nd and 3rd bid. The Qataris aren't going to offer more if Sir Jim Ratcliffe isn't going to match him. It's as simple as that. I think the Rain Group obviously will try and get a higher bid, as will the Glazers. But Tom, on that final point you made, I really think I can't see Manchester United being run like PSG, and maybe that's the optimist in me, but I just can't see it. I think under Richard Arnold, we've seen a lot of positive steps being taken from the Ed Woodward era, and that's even under the Glazers' ownership. I think Richard Arnold deserves some credit here. He went when fans crashed up to his house. He said, "Let's go down to the pub and I'll have a chat with you," and he did. And I thought some of those fans there recorded him in bad faith and shouldn't have done that. but he still was open and honest, and he was critical of things with the Glazers. He was critical of things that Ed Woodward had done as his predecessor. And you have to say he's come in and he's done a pretty good job. In terms of our transfer window, you can say whether Ten Hag was too hands-on or not, but irrespective, outside of Anthony, the business we did was fairly positive, I think you can say. Every signing's been a success. All in all, they don't have to come here and do mass wholesale changes. I think they just need to fine-tune what we're already doing and invest in this in the football club. It's as simple as that. I think
Look, you're right, but the question I'll throw back to you: will they? Like in terms of Richard Arnold, when they walk through the door, is he the new? Is he going to continue in his position, or they bring someone else in?
I think he will, because when you're a new owner, again, when you're PSG, when you're Manchester City, with all due respect, the size of the fan base isn't there. You can do what you like. There is a history at Manchester United that they need to be very mindful of, and it's a very vocal and large fan base. So everything they do will need to be well thought out. This isn't PSG. PSG were struggling. They weren't mid-table, but they were finishing 5th, 6th in Ligue 1 prior to the ownership. They weren't an elite football club. So again, Manchester City, they were getting relegated every other season, struggling in the Premier League when they were bought. So it's a very different scenario. You're talking about a club that makes its own money with poor owners, is still in the top 3-4 football clubs in the world in terms of turnover and profit and revenue. So there isn't a lot of tweaking to do here. And that's why I think Richard Arnold will absolutely still keep his job. I think Erik ten Hag will still be the main man. You only have to
that's my main thing at the moment. The first thing when they come in the door, they need to give him a new contract. We can't have a Todd Boehly, and it's definitely not accusing them, but we can't have a Todd Boehly situation where you come in and sack the manager, which unfortunately happens so often with new owners. Now, let's not say, as you say, that these Qatari owners would do that, but again, maybe the pessimism in me would suggest that is a fear. But Erik ten Hag, they're the owners, they're the ones on the door, they're the ones with the keys to Old Trafford, but ultimately the main man at Old Trafford for me should always and will always, in my heart, be the manager. Whether that's a manager we don't like in Louis van Gaal or Jose Mourinho or Rangnick, okay, or Sir Alex Ferguson or Sir Matt Busby. The man who needs full control at Manchester United is not the owner, he's not the CEO, it's the football manager. And fingers crossed, that hasn't been the case at PSG. We've seen player power have far more control at PSG. Fingers crossed at Manchester United. Lessons have been learnt, and Erik ten Hag has full control.
And Ten Hag has shown this year, to your point, Ten Hag has shown this year with Harry Maguire, with Cristiano Ronaldo, with Marcus Rashford. Let's not forget he was dropped for a game for being late to training. When you look at the form Marcus Rashford is in, if an ego like that was out of control, if that was Kylian Mbappe who slept in and was dropped to the bench, imagine what a different scenario how that plays out.
Yeah.
So I think if you're any owner coming in, you have to look at the job that Erik ten Hag has done. He's got this club 5 points off the top, dominating Barcelona at the Nou Camp, with Fred in the midfield. Like, this guy's working absolute magic. So exactly again, back to what I was saying before, there's not wholesale change to be done here. You just need to go back on top of what's being done with a bit of investment, a bit of fine tuning, and I think we'll be off and singing. Tom, I'm going to bring it back to Jim Ratcliffe because we kind of haven't spoken about him. And I think everyone in the comments and any Manchester United fan has probably drawn that this is a foregone conclusion and we're accepting that our new owners will be from Qatar. But let's bring it back to Jim Ratcliffe, because in his statement, it's about his legacy. It's about putting the Manchester back in Manchester United. Do you view that as what he actually thinks? Do you think he's trying to use his English heritage as the only advantage point that he might potentially have in terms of getting the fans on board? How do you see his position with these two bids? Do you think he's out of the fight, or do you think he very much does have a chance? Obviously, Nice are 7th in Ligue 1. They haven't been a success under his ownership. Jim Ratcliffe, is he a chance, or are we?
You'd have to ask the Glazers if he's a chance. That'll be a financial situation. I think it's hard. You could almost separate. You could distinguish the Qatari bid and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and also the Manchester United fan base into the Twitter fan base and sort of proper Manchester United fans. And that, by proper, I don't mean season ticket holders at Old Trafford, but just the difference between the people who lose their shit online compared to sort of proper Manchester United fans. So let's say Twitter is on Qatar's side and proper Manchester United fans are on Sir Jim Ratcliffe. No, I'm not saying proper Reds sort of aren't favouring Qatar, but just if you just differentiate the two, they're sort of clear differences. I think what Sir Jim Ratcliffe is potentially playing on, and again, I don't understand the reasoning behind sort of these bids playing on fans' emotions or positive PR. They should be sucking up the Glazers, not Manchester United fans. I'm not sure. Maybe there is a reason. I think their focus should be the Glazers. But in regards to Sir Jim Ratcliffe, at its core, people might not want to believe this or think of this. At its core, Manchester United is a football club from Manchester. At its soul, and at its core, that's what it is. It's about Manchester, the communities around Manchester, and the people working in Manchester. That's what Manchester United was built on. Now, ultimately, there is a part in Sir Jim Ratcliffe who's completely right to sort of play that. No, don't want to say play that card in a negative way, but I don't find that as I'm sure people will sort of bring in sort of racist elements or xenophobic elements into that aspect. I don't think that's the case. I think at its core, that is a huge importance to Manchester United fans, whether me on Sydney or someone in Salford. I think that is a huge thing in regards to respecting Manchester and the core values of the club. Now, are those core values, or is this card Jim Ratcliffe playing sort of anti-Qatar ownership? I'm not sure. Maybe it is. You'd have to ask him and how these negotiations work. But I don't think Sir Jim Ratcliffe should be sort of vilified, and this is not me saying I'm on Ratcliffe's side. At the moment, I'm leaning towards Qatari ownership, but I don't think Sir Jim Ratcliffe should be sort of vilified or looked down upon in regards to what he wants to do with Manchester United. I think maybe Qatar will provide us with better success at the moment. If I was to have money on where I think our safer future is in 20, 50 years down the track, I have a feeling, as I said, going back to the core of what Manchester United is, I'll be more confident in the future under Sir Jim Ratcliffe in regards to the best for Manchester United. In the short term, I mean 10, 15 years, I see huge success under the Qatari ownership. Oil me up, as I said, I'm all for it. But ultimately, I think they're the two differences in Manchester United or Manchester United's future.
Craig makes a really good point here, and it touches on the financial aspect. Ineos are using partner investors, which is right. Jim Ratcliffe has gained financial backing from investment banks to get this done, which tells me he's identifying that he actually doesn't have the capital himself to get United back to where they need to be. And they will want money eventually taking dividends. I agree with Craig. I think that if you're Manchester United looking under a Jim Ratcliffe ownership, I think he views it as a business. He built Ineos from scratch, and he deserves full credit for that. Self-made billionaire, I got time for that. But ultimately, I think Jim Ratcliffe will look at this as wanting an investment on a business return. And I don't think it's the same for the Qataris.
Yeah, well, as I said, one of the lines from the PR aspect for the Qatar is the guy doesn't want any money. Now, of course, that goes back into the political discussion in regards to, of course, the Qatari sort of motive for buying Manchester United is not to get cash in hand from the purchase. It's to welcome people, tourism to Qatar, for Qatar to take their first steps into the Western world in regards to that's what they want out of it, not cash in hand. So I think that is where, 100% is right. And I do favour the Qatari bid in regards to those upfront finances. But if you look at how the Glazers have run the club absolutely horribly in the last 15 years. But ultimately, as I said, with one or two adjustments, they could have run the club as they have. But if they made different decisions, we still would have won everything. And I'm just thinking, under Sir Jim Ratcliffe, yes, okay, and I'm not clamouring for dividends to be taken out, but if he could take a dividend out or he could sort of have a £200 million debt on the club, but with the right decisions, we made the right decisions when Sir Alex Ferguson was in charge and the debt was there. Okay, and we won trophies. So I'm just thinking as I said, if I'm a betting man, I think we have more success under Qatar at the moment, but that's not to say we don't have success under Sir Jim Ratcliffe.
It will be interesting. All I ask of the Qatari ownership, like you said, at the heart of it, the first word in the football club's name is Manchester. And I hope the people there aren't forgotten about, the roots of that football club aren't forgotten about, because a lot of those fans who go to football games are hard, blue-collar working men who support their partners. They are women who have grown up in the community. That is what Manchester is. It's about the arts. It's about diversity. And at the heart of it, I just hope that the Qataris acknowledge, respect, and invest in the community as much as the football club. Tom, and a fun way to end the video, I want you to give me a prediction. Firstly, which owner do you think will succeed? Qatar, Jim Ratcliffe? If you think it'll be Elon Musk, someone out of the blue, tell me that right now. And the second question I'm going to ask you is, predict one big name player signing that you expect to happen in the summer, assuming whoever takes over.
Can I be boring and just give the obvious answer, which I think the obvious is pretty much bang on? I think it'll be Qatari ownership, and at the moment I lean towards that. As much as I question, at the moment I do side and prefer the Qatari model, and I think Mbappe walks through the door.
I'm with you. I think if the Qatari ownership happens, and crucially, if Erik ten Hag wants him, which we'll do a whole separate video on that as the time rolls on and as this deal progresses. But if Erik ten Hag wants Mbappe, give me a front three of Marcus Rashford on the left, Kylian Mbappe down the middle, Anthony or Sancho on the right. Give it up.
And look, that is where the excitement as Manchester United fans come now. As I said, we can have a different debate on Mbappe. Would he suit Manchester United in regards to what Erik ten Hag wants? A different debate. But ultimately, that is where this excitement does come because, as I said, if Manchester United was run properly, and what I mean by run properly, the dividends weren't taken out. We didn't have to service the debt at Manchester United. Our front three over the last 10 years, I'm telling you, should have been Ronaldo through the middle, Messi on the right, and Neymar on the left. That should have been our front three with those three players in their prime. It should have been in terms of the money this club generates and could have spent. That should have been in terms of where we want to be. I'm not taking the piss with that. I truly believe that.
I'm going to tweak that front three a little bit. I'm going to say Ronaldo on the left, Wayne Rooney down the middle, and Gareth Bale.
Yeah. Okay, take your pick. But we should have had the front three. Now, I know Messi or PSG have that at the moment, but the dynamic of those players in terms of the way they play, and at stage, obviously Messi's stage of his career, that's a little bit tricky. But I'm telling you, in our prime, in terms of where Manchester United were off the back of winning that last title under Sir Alex Ferguson, or when Ronaldo left, we should have kept Ronaldo, 2009, 2010. And built on that. But ultimately, we replaced Ronaldo with Michael Owen and Gabriel Obertan. And I'm just thinking that wasn't run properly. Now, if we run properly now, with significant investment, not having sort of money drained out of the club, over £2 billion drained out of the club, if that's sort of not reinvested, but that just stays there, Manchester United will be in a far better position. Now, a huge part of this sort of financials and Qatar's allowance to spend big money in the transfer window will be the stadium issue, which we haven't even touched on this in regards to... Can I just bring up the statement just one more time here? I'll just bring it up here in regards to, it does mention stadium. So invest in the football teams, the training centre and the stadium. Again, that is a huge thing for me. This stadium needs to be, as I said, Erik ten Hag new contract. Next thing, address the stadium.
Absolutely. And on that, with Kylian Mbappe going to be Manchester United's new signing, I'm about to go dip myself into some oil to celebrate some, let's call it pre-oiling up. I know that could be used in different contexts, and I'll leave that to the imagination of the listeners. But if you are new, make sure you do hit a like on the video and do subscribe because we're giving you news about Qatar, talking about Manchester United all the way from Sydney. But I hope you've enjoyed that. I've been Larry. That's been Tom. Tom, I'll catch you in a little bit. And we've got Leicester Monday morning. So the football.
We've got a football match.
There's a football match. We're a football club. I know. It's unbelievable. But everyone enjoy your weekend and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.